Afghanistan really didn't need to end this way. It was simply not preordained that Afghanistan would fall back into the clutches of the Taliban. It was not preordained that we'd see scenes over these last, particularly week or so, reminiscent of the evacuation of US forces from Saigon. Now, yes, I'm the first to make the case that the military operation against Afghanistan in 2001 was warranted. Clearly, we needed to respond to the shocking al-Qaeda attacks in the United States. And clearly, al-Qaeda was so interwoven with the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2001 that to remove al-Qaeda, we needed to remove the Taliban regime. I don't dispute any of that. But what was required back then was a short, sharp military action backed up by the strongest possible Western support and investment and nation rebuilding. But of course, what happened was, as early as the year after 2001, in 2002, the US and the UK in particular were pulling their troops out of Afghanistan to get ready to go and do Iraq, if I can use that term. In fact, by 2004, there were some 100,000 US soldiers in Iraq and only about 15,000 soldiers in Afghanistan. In other words, where we are today was failure by design. In other words, the architects of that withdrawal or thinning out and distraction of the terrible Iraq war were President George W. Bush, were Prime Minister Tony Blair, were our own Prime Minister John Howard. But anyway, we are now where we are, and the question is, how do we help clean up the mess that we helped create? Of course, there was much effort and full mark to the Australian Defence Force and to the US and British and other militaries to get as many people out as they could in recent days. But of course, so many people who are at grave risk are still in Afghanistan, who still need to somehow get out of that country to safety. So somehow we have to have a channel of communication with the new regime, as does the United States, the UK, and ideally UNHCR, some sort of channel of communication to try and work with the new regime to allow people at risk out of that country. But of course that will amount to nothing unless countries like our own, fortunate countries like our own, greatly increase our humanitarian intake to allow those people somewhere to go and not be just stuck in countries of first asylum like Pakistan and Iran. Now, I do note the Australian government has announced an initial allocation of 3,000 in our humanitarian intake, and I do note the Prime Minister has signalled that this won't be the end of it. But let's stop the uncertainty. Let's get out there with big numbers. You know, the US, the UK are talking tens of thousands as a sure thing. Well, why don't we end the uncertainty and announce that over the next, year or so, we too will take tens of thousands of wonderful people from Afghanistan. You know, there are doctors and engineers and nurses and social workers and poets and artists and all sorts of people there at risk. Let them come to Australia. Let them make our country all the richer. And at the same time, we need to acknowledge that a lot of Afghans will be fleeing across land to find some sort of safety in neighbouring countries, countries of first asylum, like I said, Pakistan and Iran. So we really need to help those countries host those people, at least temporarily. So we do need to send humanitarian aid to Pakistan and Iran. And we need to very quickly give certainty to Afghans in Australia, give them permanent residency. And we need to also use the episodes of Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, as a prompt to revisit the whole issue of war powers. Now, I asked a question of the Prime Minister this the other day and he batted it away, but he can't keep batting it away. We need the Parliament to be more involved in future in decisions of war and peace, not in emergency situations, but when there's time to really think about an impending conflict, as was the case with Afghanistan, which was a matter of months, as was the case with Iraq, which was almost a matter of years. So in closing, Deputy Speaker, and I thank your forbearance of the technology I've battled through down here in Hobart in recent times, but I'm online now. I make the point in closing, we helped to make that mess. We need to do everything in our power to help clean it up. Thank you, Speaker.